So hi again. This time I will show you the game number 6 from my top 10 favorite chess games. It was played between Efim Bogoljubow and Alekhine in 1922 in Hastings, and it features a magnificent sequence of tactics which will surely leave you stunned after you see it. So let's just see it. d4, f5, the Dutch defense, to which I normally recommend the move e4, which is the Staunton gambit, after which white is often getting a very good and rapid attack, but it wasn't chosen, and it was not chosen this game because, well, in those times people were meeting the Dutch in the classical way, which is the way Bogoljubow does in this game. So bishop b4 check, bishops were traded, knight c6, knight f3, castles, castles. This is a very typical Dutch position. And now this is a lot of arrows out there. The point that I want to make here is that in this position black is facing one trouble, but also is on the advantage on the other hand. White is putting a lot of pressure on the black's queen side, and hinders the development of the bishop on c8. But black also has the possibility to one day move on with e5 and gain space advantage in the center. But that's not really possible right now due to this queen eyeballing this king. So that's why the king moved over, so that e5 is now possible. But now queen c3 with the same idea, again lining the queen up with the king. And after e5, this was defended. The other move that could have potentially been discussed here was probably e takes d5, but this actually is very bad because if you try to win the pawn this way, you actually lose the knight on d2, and black gets very active queen. So if you just want to go further with down this line, well, I think it's definitely better for black. He's up a piece. Even though, okay, you maybe have something like this, but it's still not enough. And after rook g8, black is absolutely safe and has an extra knight. So after e3, a5 was played, and just gaining space on the queen side. It was met with b3, probably preventing a5, but also perhaps, yeah, it mostly was aimed to prevent a5, because now if a5 is played, b4 can be played and it cannot be captured en passant. So queen e8, a typical idea that you could also see in Polish Immortal, the game number 10 on my list, in which the queen is shifting over to the king side, and attacks the pawn on h2. a3, so supporting the b4 break, still keeping in mind that this bishop actually was putting big pressure on black queen side, and white wants to strike at black where he is the weakest. So queen h5, simply bringing the queen to the attack. This is met with h4. If d takes e5 is played, because now of course the queen is no longer putting pressure on this knight here, but it is not good anyway, because after d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5, and here knight g4 is winning because there is a fork on the queen and checkmate threatened. The best move here is knight f3, giving away the queen. So yeah, and if b4 is tried, simply going on with the plan of white, then actually e4 is good, and after knight e1, a takes b4, and you can see that there is this trouble because black will eventually win the pawn. So that was not the way to go. So that's why white here played h4, locking down the king's side. Knight g5, putting the knight on the active post. Knight g5 from white. Bishop d7. f3 kicking the knight away. Knight goes back. And f4. So putting pressure in the center, looking to trade some pawns there. Black, of course, is not interested in that. He plays e4, gains a lot of space and avoids all of these exchanges. Rook fd1, potentially supporting this pawn. Simply h6, kicking the knight to h3, and now d5. Locking down the center. Now, why is black locking down the center? Well, it's pretty obvious that he's got a space advantage. And when we compare the pawns, well, these are on the 4th ranks, both of them, and this one is on the 3rd rank of whites, and this is on the 5th rank of blacks. So this pawn is much more valuable than this pawn, which means that black has a space advantage. So he wants to keep it as so. Knight f1. There is no point in capturing here. After knight takes d5, the queen has to move, and then maybe not here, but if the queen moves, then you drop this pawn, which is quite unfortunate. That's why this was not taken. Knight f1, knight e7, potentially supporting some breaks with the c pawn. Either c6 supporting the d5 pawn, or perhaps c5 to break in the center. a4, and now Alekhine decides to go back with the knight to c6. He does so because the move a4 weakens the b4 square, which allows the knight to come there and be there forever. He's untouchable in that square. So rook d2, either taking control of the 2nd rank, or perhaps getting ready to double, not really sure. Knight b4, as I said, occupying the 4-post, and bishop h1, also kind of logical, sidestepping maybe all of the threats connected with this, also maybe creating some more space for the king. Queen e8, sorry. So the queen switches over back to the center because there was no point for the queen to sit on the king side. It's done its job. This is all locked down here, and black is not looking to take any action out there. So rook g2, maybe supporting the g4 advancement. This was exchanged, and bishop takes on a4, so winning the pawn. Knight f2, so there is a lot of maneuvering done by Bogoljubow here. He's really trying to advance this pawn as quickly as possible. The bishop retreats so that the queen does not have to babysit it, also making a path for this pawn. Knight d2, bringing the knight over to the action, and b5. So black wants to initiate some action on the queen side, and after knight d1 could potentially take on c4, but not sure if that's the best way to go about this, because after knight c4, knight d5, attacking the queen and the pawn. So okay, the queen moves, and black's pieces, black's knights especially, are completely dominating the position. And as you can imagine, for instance, rook to f6 can be played, and now you can either come to e3 where the knight is a monster, and then bring your rooks possibly to the b file and attack. That would be really good position for black here. But it was not chosen, and Alekhine placed his knight here as an outpost. The knight is untouchable here. It's behind the chain of pawns. And if you try to get rid of this knight very quickly with, say, knight b2, well, then actually b4 comes, and after queen c2 you have to babysit the knight. You can actually exchange and go queen f7, and then these two pawns are passed, so we cannot really allow it. So the move chosen by Bogoljubow here also could have tried to take the pawn, but after bishop takes on b5, if he tried to win the pawn on a5, then knight d5 would be very strong. After queen a3, say exchange, queen c6, and you can see how active black pieces are compared to white. These two are completely not contributing to the position. So yeah, that was the way. And after knight d3, Bogoljubow went for a pawn. He captured on a5, which is a blunder, but a very subtle one, so to speak. Alekhine played b4, an outstanding move, surely, because now, well, these two are disconnected, But it seems as if, well, after simply Bogoljubow takes the rook on a8, now he's threatening black queen. But wait a moment, Alekhine took the queen. Possibly even better was simply to take the rook back. And this is probably what Bogoljubow had in mind. But that would allow the queen to b3. And, well, this position would end up in something like this, where black is better, to be sure, with this passed pawn. But it's not very clear how is he going to win this. But Alekhine found an amazing tactical sequence. He actually decided to take white's queen and give up his queen. And now even more amazing move, he didn't recapture the rook, because this was certainly possible to take back. But then simply knight takes c3 and the position is around equal. Okay, black has this fantastic knight, but nothing to show for. That's why Alekhine played c2, simply giving up his rook. But of course it has to be noticed that this pawn will promote to a queen. And you may think, okay, what if just rook takes? Well, this is exactly what happened. And knight played to f2. You could think that perhaps there is a way to stop the pawn because of knight to b3, preventing this, but wait a moment, now I take your knight. It's check, and after king h2, simply, I think it's mate immediately. The engine actually says it's mate in 3. After knight g4, king h3 takes, and that's checkmate. A very beautiful one. So it was not possible to stop this pawn, so Bogoljubow saved his knight, and Alekhine promoted his pawn to a queen with check. Knight f1 and knight e8. Knight e1, sorry. Knight e1 attacks the rook, so it has to move. And now queen takes pawn simply. And the idea is that these pieces, even though theoretically balance the queen, they do not really, because they're so much, they don't have space, any space at all. And soon Alekhine is simply going to play bishop b5 and create a battery on this knight on f1. That's why rook b8 was played, so that after bishop b5, when this battery is created, and you cannot really defend the knight, bishop g2 absolutely does nothing, because, well, this still loses a knight. So Bogoljubow was forced to take the bishop, and after queen recaptured, g4 was played. So Bogoljubow is trying desperately to prepare some breaks on the king's side and perhaps look to open up the position, maybe get some counterplay against black's king. But knight f6 check, bishop takes, pawn takes, g takes f5. So it seems, of course, two knights and the rook normally balance the queen, but in this case it's simply not possible. Queen e2 was played, so Alekhine does not want really to recapture this pawn. There's no need to do that. He has a more active plan. Queen e2, so threatening the pawn on e3, and also maybe supporting this one. And okay, Bogoljubow played d5. There was nothing else to do. If, let's say, rook h3 is tried to win this pawn, and actually knight g4, putting pressure here. If the knight, of course, cannot be exchanged due to mate, and you cannot defend the knight in any way. You cannot just go back and give everything up. So this is what if rook h3 is played. If, say, knight h3, trying to get something going against this queen, then again knight g4 is an idea. So there is the same motif. If you take the queen, then pawn takes, and actually the pawn is unstoppable. The knight is covering the f2 square, so the king cannot approach the pawn, and the knights are useless. They cannot take control of the e1 square, so black will promote to a queen here. That's why d5 was played. There was really no way to move any of the pieces. King g8, so simply bringing the king closer to the action. Black has time for all that because white cannot move any of its pieces, so he can simply bring his king to the action and get ready for the endgame. So h5, king h7, he moves around a little bit. He knows that white cannot really do anything. Now he gave up the pawn. The knights were exchanged, and after d6, This was taken. f6, g takes, rook d2, and here another very, very elegant move. Queen to e2 was played, giving up the queen. Why would you give up the queen? Well, it's very simple. After rook takes e2, f takes e2. Again, there's this motif that the pawn promotes, so the king has to go stop it, but you can take the knight, and after the king takes, you simply move the king over and win the pawn endgame. They played for a couple of more moves, and in this position, after d5 check, white resigned the game, and Alexander Alekhine won. We could potentially play out some more moves, let's say after king d4, king f5, so simply eliminate the pawn, and then, well, let's say if white continues, then we can even play something like this, and black will be quick with a pawn promotion, will be quick enough. This is easily winning. Let's say after king here, well, okay, if king here is played, then winning. Let's say if he sidestep anywhere else, then of course king f4, king, everything wins basically, because now we can get into the position that after king g5, let's say king g8, and king f6, if the pawn is moved to h7, it's checkmate, very common maneuver. And after h7, let's say queen a2 can be played, but let's say queen a7, king g8, and king g6, and now there's no way to prevent checkmate. You can play h7, well, that's mate. So, as you can see, a brilliant tactic by Alexander Alekhine, found absolutely out of nowhere. He sacrificed the rook, but the power of his pawn that was initially on the b file and now moved to the c file, promoted to the queen, and then absolutely shattered all white's defenses and basically outplayed his opponent beautifully. So I hope you enjoy this game as well. Let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts on this game, and bye for now. See you in the next one.